Three women were chatting about their love lives. The first one said, "My husband is like a Rolls Royce, smooth, luxurious, and oh so sophisticated." The second one smirked. "Well, mine is like a Porsche, fast, powerful, and always ready to go." The third woman sighed. "Lucky you. Mine's more like an old Chevy. Needs a hand crank to get started, and I have to jump on while it's still moving." An older lady was doing some household chores on a beautiful Sunday morning when she suddenly heard the doorbell ring. She opened the door to see a well-dressed man standing there who said, "Hello, I'm a Jehovah's Witness. Do you have a moment to discuss the holy word?" The lady was in a good mood and had just put on a pot of coffee, so she invited the man in and sat down with him at the kitchen table. When she offered him a cup of coffee, she noticed that the man looked a little lost. She asked, "Now, what would you like to talk about, dear?" The young man replied with a pale and shocked face, "Beats the out of me. I've never gotten this far." A blonde female bought herself a new Mercedes. She could drive the car during the day, but at night the car wouldn't move at all. She tried driving the car at night for a week with no luck. Furious, she called the dealership, told them the problem, and they sent a mechanic to the house. The mechanic gave the car a thorough inspection and could not find anything wrong. Eventually, he asked the blonde, "Are you sure you're using the right gears?" "Of course I am. I'm not stupid. I use D during the day and N at night." A tough old cowboy found himself standing before St. Peter at the pearly gates. St. Peter looked him over and asked, "Have you ever done anything truly heroic?" The cowboy scratched his chin and said, "Well, I reckon there was one time." He took a deep breath and continued, "I was riding through the Black Hills of South Dakota when I came across a gang of nasty bikers harassing a young woman. I told them to leave her alone, but they just laughed. So I walked right up to the biggest, meanest one. The guy was covered in tattoos, smacked him square in the face, kicked over his bike, yanked out his nose ring and tossed it on the ground. Then I looked at the whole gang and hollered, 'Now, back off or y'all are next.'" St. Peter, impressed, raised an eyebrow. "Wow, when did this happen?" The cowboy glanced at his watch. "Oh, about 2 minutes ago." A newlywed blonde walks into the doctor's office with a banana stuck in one ear, a cucumber in the other, and a carrot wedged in one nostril. Panicked, she says, "Doctor, this is terrible. What's wrong with me?" The doctor takes one look at her, sighs and says, "Well, for starters, you might want to rethink your diet." So Street Peter goes to the computer and realizes that an engineer accidentally ended up in He immediately gets on the phone with the devil. St. Peter, "So Dev, we have an issue with this engineering guy, Robert. He's supposed to be with us. Can you send him up?" Devil, "Bob? No way, not going to happen. Since he got down here, he fixed the air conditioning, the plumbing, and basically everything that was wrong with We're living in paradise now, thanks to Bob, and at a fraction of the cost. Would you believe he even figured out how to power everything using thermodynamics? No chance am I letting him go." St. Peter, "Well, this is highly irregular. You leave me no choice. I'll have to sue." The devil bursts into laughter. Devil, "Sue? And just where do you think you're going to find a lawyer?" A Greek and an Italian were sitting in a Starbucks one day, engaged in a friendly debate about which culture was superior. Sipping his triple latte, the Greek proudly said, "Well, we have the Parthenon." The Italian arched an eyebrow and smirked, "We have the Colosseum." Undeterred, the Greek countered, "We Greeks gave birth to advanced mathematics." The Italian nodded and replied, True, but we built the Roman Empire. Back and forth they went, each trying to one-up the other, until finally the Greek leaned back with a smug grin and declared, "We invented." The Italian took a slow sip of his coffee, thought for a moment, and then said with a knowing smile, "That's true, but we Italians introduced it to women." When Bill turned 65, he decided it was time to retire and enjoy life. But after just a few months of him being home all the time, his wife was losing patience. "Bill, you need to find a hobby. Join a club. Do something. Just get out of the house," she insisted. Wanting to keep the peace, Bill went out for a few hours and returned home feeling quite accomplished. "So, what did you do today?" his wife asked. "Oh, I went to the park, hung out with some guys. And guess what? I joined a parachute club." "A what? Are you out of your mind? You're 65 years old and you're jumping out of airplanes." "Yep. Look, they even gave me a membership card." His wife snatched the card from his hand, squinted at it, then gasped, "Bill, you idiot! This says prostitute club, not parachute club." Bill's face turned pale. "Oh no! Now what do I do? I already signed up for 5 jumps a week." A man planning his vacation wrote to a small hotel in a Midwest town, inquiring about their pet policy. "I'd love to bring my dog along," he wrote. "He's well-groomed, well-behaved, and perfectly mannered. Would it be possible for him to stay with me in my room?" The hotel owner responded promptly, "I've run this hotel for many years, and in all that time, I've never had a dog steal towels, bed linens, or silverware. I've never had to kick a dog out in the middle of the night for being drunk and disorderly. Nor have I ever had a dog leave without paying the bill. So yes, your dog is more than welcome to stay, and if he can vouch for your behavior, you're welcome too." "I went out for Chinese last night and struck up a conversation with the waiter. He told me he had lived in Japan during the war and was actually a kamikaze pilot. His code name, Chow Mein." I raised an eyebrow and said, "Wait a minute. Didn't kamikaze pilots sacrifice their own lives?" He nodded and grinned. "Yes, but I was chicken chow mein." A 5-year-old girl went to visit her grandmother one day. She played with her dolls as Grandma dusted the furniture. At one point, she looked up and asked, "Grandma, how come you don't have a boyfriend?" Grandma replied, "Honey, my TV is my boyfriend. I can sit in my bed and watch it all day long. The TV evangelists keep me company and make me feel so good. The comedies make me laugh. I'm so happy with my TV as my boyfriend." Grandma turned on the TV and the picture was horrible. She started adjusting the knobs, trying to get the picture in focus. Frustrated, she started hitting the back of the TV, hoping to fix the problem. The little girl heard the doorbell ring, so she hurried to open the front door. When she opened the door, there stood Grandma's minister. The minister said, "Hello, young lady. Is your grandma home?" The little girl replied, "Yeah. She's in the bedroom banging her boyfriend." A little old lady checked into a motel on her 70th birthday, feeling a bit lonely. "I deserve some fun," she thought, flipping through the phone book. She spotted a full-page ad for Tender Tony, a chiseled, muscular man flexing seductively. Thick, wavy hair, long, powerful legs, six-pack abs, and a dazzling smile. She was pretty sure you could bounce a quarter off his backside. "What the heck? Nobody will ever know," she thought, and dialed the number. A smooth, velvety voice answered, "Good evening, ma'am. How may I assist you?" "Oh my," he sounded dreamy. Afraid she'd lose her nerve, she blurted, "Listen, I need a massage." "No, scratch that. I want excitement." "Fun, Dot? Something a little wild. Bring whatever you've got." Let's make it a night to remember. What do you say?" There was a brief pause. Then the voice calmly replied, "Ma'am, that sounds absolutely fantastic. But you need to press 9 for an outside line." An old man is eating his lunch in a restaurant when 3 bikers walk up to him. They make fun of him for being old, and then one of them stubs his cigarette into the truck driver's food. Another spits in the truck driver's milk. The last one smashes the truck driver's food on the ground, so old man gets up and leaves. "Not much of a man, was he?" one of the bikers says to the waitress. "Not much of a truck driver either," she says. "He just backed his truck over 3 motorcycles." An Amish lady is trotting down the road in her horse and buggy when she is pulled over by a cop. "Ma'am, I'm not going to ticket you, but I do have to issue you a warning. You have a broken reflector on your buggy." "Oh, I'll let my husband Jacob know as soon as I get home." "That's fine. Another thing, ma'am, I don't like the way that one rein loops across the horse's back and around one of his balls. I consider that animal abuse. That's cruelty to animals. Have your husband take care of that right away." Later that day, the lady is home telling her husband about her encounter with the cop. "Well, dear, what exactly did he say?" "He said the reflector is broken." "I can fix that in 2 minutes. What else?" "I'm not sure, Jacob. Something about the emergency brake." A man goes to the doctor and tells him that he hasn't been feeling well. The doctor examines him, leaves the room, and comes back with 3 different bottles of pills. The doctor says, "Take the green pill with a big glass of water when you get up. Take the blue pill with a big glass of water after lunch. Then just before going to bed, take the red pill with another big glass of water." Startled to be put on so much medicine, the man stammers, "Geez, doc, exactly what's my problem?" The doctor replied, "You're not drinking enough water." Doug Smith is on his deathbed and knows the end is near. His nurse, his wife, his daughter, and 2 sons are with him. He asks for 2 witnesses to be present and a camcorder be in place to record his last wishes. And when all is ready, he begins to speak. "My son, Bernie, I want you to take the Mayfair houses. My daughter, Sybil, you take the apartments over in the East End. My son, Jamie, I want you to take the offices over in the city center. Sarah, my dear wife, please take all the residential buildings on the banks of the river." The nurse and witnesses are blown away as they did not realize his extensive holdings, and as Doug slips away, the nurse says, "Mrs. Smith, your husband must have been such a hard-working man to have accumulated all this property." Sarah replies, "Property? The had a paper round." 3 elderly friends were reminiscing about the challenges of aging. "60 is the toughest age," Ruth, who was 60, said with a sigh. "You always feel like you need to go to the bathroom, but then nothing really happens." Maxine, who was 70, chuckled and said, "Oh, that's nothing." At 70, you can't seem to get things moving at all. You take every kind of laxative, eat all the bran you can, and still end up sitting on the toilet all day with no results. Gilda, the 80-year-old, shook her head with a smile. 80 is the worst age by far. "Do you have trouble with peeing too?" Ruth asked. "No, I have no problem with that," Gilda replied. "I pee like a racehorse every morning at 6 a.m. sharp." Maxine then asked, "And what about your bowel movements?" "Not a problem there either," Gilda answered. "I have a bowel movement every morning at 6:30. Ruth was curious. "So, if you pee at 6 a.m. and have a bowel movement at 6:30, what's so difficult about being 80? Gilda shrugged with a grin. "The trouble is, I don't wake up until 7. 3 kids are arguing about whose dad is the fastest. At lunch, the first boy says, "My dad is the fastest because he is a bricklayer," and when he drops a brick from the 5th floor, he can run to the ground level and be there before the brick hits. Not bad, says the second boy, but my dad is faster. He is a professional archer. When he shoots an arrow at the bullseye, he can reach it before the arrow does. That's pretty fast, says the third boy, but not as fast as my old man. My dad works for the government as a public servant, and when he finishes work at 5 p.m., he can get home by 2:30 p.m. In court, the lawyer leaned forward, visibly confused. So, what exactly happened that you're filing for divorce the day after your wedding night? Surely, this can't be serious. The husband shook his head in frustration. Well, I went into the bedroom feeling excited and romantic. I looked at her and said, "Take off your bra." She looked at me, dead serious, and said, "Take it off yourself." The lawyer, still confused, asked, "And that's why you're divorcing her? Seems a little extreme." The husband groaned. "No, you don't get it. I spent half an hour trying to take it off. I gave up at the end. If that's how complicated the start is, I don't want to see what's next." Sarah was driving home from one of her business trips in Berlin when she saw an elderly woman walking on the side of the road. As the trip was a long and quiet one, she stopped the car and asked the woman if she would like a ride. With a silent nod of thanks, the woman got into the car. Resuming the journey, Sarah tried in vain to make a bit of small talk with the woman. The old woman just sat silently, looking intently at everything she saw, studying every little detail, until she noticed a brown bag on the seat next to Sarah. "What's in the bag?" asked the old woman. Sarah looked down at the brown bag and said, "It's a bottle of wine. Got it for my husband." The old woman was silent for another moment or two, then speaking with the quiet wisdom of an elder, she said, "Good trade." While showing off his new apartment to friends one night, a drunk man led the way to his bedroom where there was a huge clock on the wall with a big brass gong. "What's that brass gong for?" asked one of the guests. "Why, that's the talking clock," the man replied. "How does it work?" asked a second friend. "Watch," the man said, giving it an ear-shattering pound with a hammer. Suddenly, someone on the other side of the wall screamed, "For heaven's sake, you it's 2 a.m. in the morning." The wealthy, snobbish wife was reviewing Christmas gifts with her maid. "What should we get for the butler?" she asked. "How about a set of wine glasses?" the maid suggested. The woman's lips pursed in disapproval. "Nonsense! A butler doesn't host parties. He'll get a tie." The maid bit her tongue and moved on. "And Jenny, the serving girl? A nice dress, perhaps?" Another frosty frown. "She doesn't need a dress. She'll just ruin it. An apron will do." Gift after gift, the conversation followed the same pattern, the maid growing increasingly irritated by her employer's stinginess. Finally, they reached the topic of the woman's husband. "I assume you want to get him something he really needs, madam?" the maid asked innocently. "Of course," the woman replied. "Well then," the maid said with a smirk, "how about 3 more inches?" Have you heard about the guys who drove their pickup truck into a lumberyard? One of them walked into the office and said, "We need some 4x2s. The clerk raised an eyebrow. "You mean 2x4s, right?" The man scratched his head. "Let me check." He walked back to the truck, had a quick chat, and returned. "Yep, 2x4s. "All right, how long do you need them?" The customer frowned, deep in thought. After a long pause, he said, "Hang on, I better check." He disappeared again, conferred with his buddy, and finally returned. With a confident nod, he announced, "A long time. We're building a house." When 4 of Santa's elves came down with the flu, the trainee elves struggled to keep up, and the toy production line slowed to a crawl. The pre-Christmas pressure was setting in. Then, to make matters worse, Mrs. Claus cheerfully informed Santa that her mother was coming to visit. Trying to clear his head, Santa went to harness the reindeer, only to find that 3 were about to give birth and 2 had jumped the fence and vanished into the great unknown. Determined to push forward, he started loading the sleigh. But as luck would have it, a floorboard cracked, the toy bag tumbled, and gifts exploded everywhere. Frustrated and exhausted, Santa stormed into the house for a cup of apple cider and maybe a shot of rum to take the edge off. But when he opened the cupboard, he discovered that the elves had drunk all the cider and, just to top it off, hidden the liquor. In his frustration, he knocked over the cider jug, sending hundreds of tiny glass shards flying across the kitchen floor. He reached for the broom, only to discover that the mice had chewed all the straw off the end. Just then, the doorbell rang. With barely contained rage, Santa stomped to the door and yanked it open. There stood a tiny, cheerful angel holding a giant Christmas tree. "Merry Christmas, Santa! Isn't this a wonderful day? I have a beautiful tree for you. Now, where would you like me to stick it?" And that, my friends, is how the tradition of the angel on top of the Christmas tree began. Not many people know this. A young man at this construction site was bragging that he could outdo anyone based on his strength. He especially made fun of one of the older workmen. After several minutes, the older worker had enough. "Why don't you put your money where your mouth is?" he said. "I'll bet a week's wages that I can haul something in a wheelbarrow over to the other building that you won't be able to wheel back." "You're on, old man," the young man replied. "Let's see what you've got." The old man reached out and grabbed the wheelbarrow by the handles. Then, nodding to the young man, he said with a smile, "All right, get in." 4 buddies went on a deer hunting trip and had to bunk 2 to a room. The problem? Nobody wanted to share a room with Daryl. His snoring was legendary. They decided it wasn't fair to make just one guy suffer the whole trip, so they agreed to take turns. The first night, the unlucky draw went to Jim. The next morning, he staggered into breakfast, looking like he'd spent the night wrestling a bear. Hair wild, eyes bloodshot, hands shaking. "Man, what happened to you?" the others asked. "Daryl snores so loud I just sat up and watched him all night," Jim groaned. The second night, it was Mike's turn. By morning, he stumbled into breakfast, looking even worse, like he'd aged 10 years overnight. "Dude, you okay?" the others asked, concerned. "Man, that guy shakes the walls. I didn't sleep a second. I just sat up and watched him all night." Then came Frank's turn. Frank was a big, burly ex-football player, tough as nails, scared of nothing. The next morning, he strolled into breakfast, looking fresh as a daisy, whistling a happy tune. The others gawked at him. "Wait, what happened? How are you so rested?" Frank grinned. "Well, we got ready for bed. I tucked Daryl in nice and snug, patted his butt, and gave him a little goodnight kiss." He paused for effect. "Daryl sat up and watched me all night." An engineering student was walking to class when he spotted a frog on the ground. "If you kiss me," the frog said, "I'll turn into a beautiful princess." The student smiled, thought for a moment, then picked up the frog and slipped it into his bag before continuing on his way. A few minutes later, the frog called out again, "If you kiss me, I'll turn into a beautiful princess and even go on a date with you." The student chuckled, took a look at the frog, then put it back in his bag and kept walking. A little while later, the frog piped up again. "If you kiss me, I'll turn into a princess, go on multiple dates with you, introduce you to my parents. Who knows what could happen after that?" The student grinned and started to put the frog back in his bag. "Wait, why won't you kiss me?" the frog exclaimed. "Look," the student said, "I'm way too busy with school to have a girlfriend. But a talking frog? Now that's cool." Tom had been in the liquor business for 25 years. Sick of the stress, he decided to quit his job and buy 50 acres of land in Alaska, as far from civilization as possible. The only human interaction he had was a visit from the postman once a week and a grocery delivery once a month. Aside from that, it was total peace and quiet. After about 6 months of nearly complete isolation, someone knocked on his door. He opened it to find a huge, bearded man standing there. "Name's Lars, your neighbor from 40 miles up the road. I'm having a Christmas party Friday night. Thought you might like to come, around 5 o'clock. "Great," says Tom. "After 6 months out here, I'm ready to meet some local folks. Thanks for the invite." As Lars turned to leave, he paused and added, "Gotta warn you, there'll be some drinking." "Not a problem," says Tom. "After 25 years in the business, I can drink with the best of them." Lars started to walk away again, then stopped. "More'n likely there'll be some fighting too." "Well, I get along with people, I'll be fine," Tom reassured him. "I'll be there. Thanks again." Lars hesitated for a moment, then added, "More'n likely there'll be some wild too." Tom grinned, warming to the idea. "That's really not a problem. I've been all alone for 6 months. I'll definitely be there. By the way, what should I wear?" Lars gave a long look and said, "Don't much matter. It's just gonna be the two of us." A private school recently faced an unusual problem. A group of 12-year-old girls had started using lipstick and, after applying it, would press their lips to the bathroom mirrors, leaving dozens of little lip prints. While it wasn't a huge issue at first, it became a constant problem for the maintenance man, who had to clean the mirrors every night. Yet every day the lip prints would appear again. Frustrated, the principal decided it was time to take action. She gathered all the girls in the bathroom and brought along the maintenance man to show them the challenge. She explained that the lip prints were creating extra work for him, who had to clean the mirrors every evening. To make her point, she asked the maintenance man to demonstrate how much effort it took to clean the mirrors. With a knowing smile, the maintenance man pulled out a long-handled squeegee, dipped it into the toilet, and proceeded to clean the mirror. Needless to say, there were no more lip prints on the mirrors after that day. There are teachers, and then there are educators. The priest asks, "Is that you, little Joey Pagano?" "Yes, Father, it is." "And who was the girl you were with?" "I can't tell you, Father. I don't want to ruin her reputation." "Well, Joey, I'm sure to find out her name sooner or later, so you may as well tell me now. Was it Tina Minetti?" "I cannot say." "Was it Teresa Mazzarelli?" "I'll never tell." "Was it Nina Capelli?" "I'm sorry, but I cannot name her." "Was it Kathy Piriano?" "My lips are sealed." "Was it Rosa D'Angelo then?" "Please, Father, I cannot tell you." The priest sighs in frustration. "You're very tight-lipped, and I admire that, but you've sinned and have to atone. You cannot be an altar boy now for 4 months. Now you go and behave yourself." Joey walks back to his pew, and his friend Franco slides over and whispers, "What did you get?" 4 months vacation and 5 good leads. Longtime friends Sylvia and Wanda meet up in heaven. Sylvia: "Hi." Wanda: "Hi." Sylvia: "How'd you die?" Sylvia: "I froze to death." Wanda: "How horrible." Sylvia: "It wasn't so bad. After I quit shaking from the cold, I began to get warm and sleepy, and finally died a peaceful death." "What about you?" Wanda: "I died of a massive heart attack. I suspected that my husband was cheating, so I came home early to catch him in the act. But instead I found him all by himself in the den watching TV." Sylvia: "So what happened?" Wanda: "I was so sure there was another woman there somewhere that I started running all over the house looking. I ran up into the attic and searched, and down into the basement. Then I went through every closet and checked under all the beds. I kept this up until I had looked everywhere, and finally I became so exhausted that I just keeled over with a heart attack and died. Sylvia, too bad you didn't look in the freezer. We'd both still be alive. Credit goes to the original owner. Our teacher asked what my favorite animal was, and I said, fried chicken. She said I wasn't funny, but she couldn't have been right, because everyone else laughed. My parents told me to always tell the truth. I did. Fried chicken is my favorite animal. I told my dad what happened, and he said my teacher was probably a member of PETA. He said they love animals. Very much. I do too. Especially chicken, pork, and beef. Anyway, my teacher sent me to the principal's office. I told him what happened, and he laughed too. Then he told me not to do it again. The next day in class, my teacher asked me what my favorite live animal was. I told her it was chicken. She asked me why, so I told her it was because you could make them into fried chicken. She sent me back to the principal's office. He laughed and told me not to do it again. I don't understand. My parents taught me to be honest, but my teacher doesn't like it when I am. Today, my teacher asked me to tell her what famous person I admired most. I told her, Colonel Sanders, KFC founder. Guess where I am now? Two elderly sisters, Sister Grace and Sister Margaret, were returning from the evening market. It was getting late, and they still had quite a walk ahead to reach their convent. Suddenly, Sister Grace grabbed Sister Margaret's arm, her voice filled with concern. "Do you see that man behind us? Is he following us?" Sister Margaret glanced back, her eyes narrowing. "It looks like he might be. What do you think he wants?" Without missing a beat, Sister Grace whispered, "I think he's up to no good." "What should we do?" Sister Margaret, thinking quickly, replied, "Let's split up. I'll go left, and you take the right path to the convent." They parted ways, and a few minutes later, Sister Grace arrived safely at the convent. As she paced nervously, worried for her friend, Sister Margaret came running down the path, breathless but safe. Sister Grace rushed to her. "What happened?" Sister Margaret caught her breath and replied, "Well, I started running, and the man began chasing me." "What did you do?" asked Sister Grace, eyes wide. "The only thing I could think of," Sister Margaret said with a smirk. "I hiked up my habit and ran." Sister Grace gasped. "And what did he do?" Sister Margaret grinned. "He dropped his trousers." Sister Grace, holding her rosary, whispered, "And then what happened?" With a chuckle, Sister Margaret said, "Isn't it obvious? A sister with her habit up runs faster than a man with his trousers down."